Peter, when you draw out of your imagination without reference, this is coming out of your head, can you do one in like a half an hour?
We'll definitely try. We're going to draw a locomotive.
Oh, great.
So I've drawn many locomotives in my time, specifically within the late 1800s. I like the classic train with a chimney that we all kind of imagine, you know. So the Travel Town Museum up in LA is where I would visit, observe those things. I can just start right away, start sketching and drawing. And that's fine, but I want to give you guys a little bit more prep and ideas to also what's happening in here. What I'm starting with is a certain side view of the train up here. So what I'm doing right now is spatially on the page, figuring out where things are going to go. When I sketch on a sketchbook, I take my hands and I tend to kind of just move things around like this.
Like Sherlock Holmes before he's going to do the fight.
Exactly, in a way. I'm exploring the page a little bit. So we'll start right off by drawing a horizontal line. This will be the ground line. In this iteration, what I'm trying to figure out is just how to build the thing as a simple study. I know trains have these front boilers that are attached to the engineer box. And as you'll see, the line movements, so the horizontal movements to the vertical movements to an arcing action if I have to, but all these are set motions. Now I'm planning in things like placement of proportion, where mechanical engineering parts will go. This will be the chimney, these will be a sand dome, this will be a steam dome, this will be another bell right there. We'll place in one of the wheels here. What I'm doing right now is I'm landmarking where things are going to go. So we'll put the chimney up here, a little light right there. This will be the sand dome. This will be the steam dome. Put a bell right here. Now, this particular train is not of a specific model. It is of a train that is an accumulation of things that I've seen of locomotives. So it is imagined in a way, where I'm creating with it to a degree, but it's based on the realities of the things that I've seen in the world around me. So now that I have this information in place, we can start to cut into the information in silhouette. This is where the transmission box will go. This is the first wheel, the second wheel. These are the driving wheels. This is the actual control arm. And the cow guard. This is where the engineer window will be fit. Now, of course, it'll be attached to a car behind it. We're just going to do the engine right now. So this side view that we had just quickly studied is to give myself an idea as to what this thing will look like. Now, do I have to do this? No, I don't have to. Now, I do this because I also want to allow myself to give myself a chance to figure out, well, what is it I want to do differently this time? Now that I have an idea as to what it looks like, right here to the bottom portion, I'm going to redraw this train now from a different angle of view and attach the same kind of detail components and add much more. So the first thing I want to establish is just a good idea as to where the horizon is supposed to be. So let's put it maybe right about here. And then we'll start to go straight in and just draw this thing out. I'll construct a little bit and I'll explain this idea of construction to a degree. For instance, we'll place in the boiler here. This line will go back this direction, which is a central boiler line. As I place that in, this will come down this direction towards where the cow guard will be. We'll place in some general guidelines as to where things will go. It'll end about here. This is where the engineer box will sit. You'll notice it's a quick action, but my hand is constantly doing this. This is the ghost of action again. I'm mimicking the motion of what I want, and then I place it down. So it feels a bit erratic at times, but once you start to feel out where things are supposed to go and you want the movement in place, your hand will start to really just react. So as I'm talking to you and talking to others, I'm able to still keep drawing, producing, moving.
And I notice how many of your lines are height, width, and depth lines so that you know where the big chunks are.
Yes. So now that I have the information, again, this is about a pretty good amount of construction that I would, probably allow myself to do. Sometimes I do a lot less, and a lot less is literally points and dots and little marks here and there. And again, I call them landmarks for myself, much like landmarking on a human proportion from the elbow to maybe like the navel cavity is supposed to be. So you kind of put landmarks to see where alignments are. So here I'm kind of doing these as also to landmark where that piece is and where that piece is. So these lines have meaning to me.
Indeed. And I also notice that when you put those landmarks for the measurements back that you've got those arrows on, you are aware that they are pointing to the center of a top plane that we don't see from this angle.
Right.
Is that correct? You're aware they're pointing down to the roof.
Yes. So now I'll keep drawing through, and now I'm starting to get in some of the ellipses. And again, this particular angle and shot, I'm doing it as basically a 1 point. And once I get to a certain level of understanding of the details, I will do a lot less construction and go straight into just those specifics of surface and mechanical information. And all that construction that was there will start to disappear. It'll become a lot less invasive to the overall sketch as a study. It'll always be there. People will always be aware of them if you're looking for them. So in the classes that I instruct, I need students to be able to not only draw the construction, but keep the construction there so that I can then see what decisions they made, why they placed in certain elements of line or shape, how it helped in their construction of accuracy proportionally. But it can be definitely pushed to the background as you layer more information on top.
So you've got a scaffolding that keeps you in track.
Yes.
But even when you put those ellipses on there and you started putting points on there, I could tell you were pulling the ellipse so that it's out a little further forward.
Yes.
So you're very aware of where those planes are, and you see it before you draw it.
Yes. A lot of it is associated to the fundamental exercise and practice of it, but also the observation, having seen it.
You've looked at a lot of trains.
Yes.
You know the parts.
Right.
I guess you'd call that anatomy. You know the anatomy of train.
It is basically that. Anything that you would draw, construct, subject matter-wise, it can be associated together. What I tell people is that, it sounds like you have to learn to draw so many things, from trains to animals and figures and subject matter of things like architecture, props, and they all feel very independent to most students and people in the beginning. So it's overwhelming. How much time do I really have then? It's like I have to spend multiple decades just to get a good sense about how to control these different subjects. And it does appear that way. But if I understand how to train my eye and my mind to visualize and sketch a certain, let's say, subject matter, and I dedicate myself to it, that information of how I approached that thing, that subject, can be bridged over to a different subject also. So if I learn how to draw humans and people very well, there's no reason why I wouldn't be able to bring in that information also to animals, also to vehicles. So to me, drawing a car, drawing a train, drawing an animal they don't feel different from each other. They feel the same. Because it's also then, I don't see it as it is. I see it as a practice of sketch and draw. That's all it is. It's the action of it, no longer the subject.
Yeah. It's like the difference between drawing a robot and drawing a human isn't that big a difference if it's a human-like robot.
For sure. Because I can use the same information from where the human anatomy was placed in and convert it into something mechanical. So the proportions can stay the same, the mechanics can stay the same in terms of articulation and joint. All that information can remain. So even if I'm drawing a train here, how would this approach itself to be applied towards a human being? Again, spatial control, landmarking, proportioning of sizing in comparison to another one, the muscle memory exercises that we've been talking about, and the remembrance of the components of the big pieces. Because there are so many small elements to this train that I can also build a memory towards, but I don't really need them. I just need the bigger components, because that will then visually communicate to a person, oh, that's a train. They understand what I'm trying to tell them.
And if you want to put the detail in, you can put it in later.
You put it in later, and that's where the reference comes in, because I will still use references. Right now, we don't need it because I am using my ability to remember the major components. But then if I need to be a specific model, or it needs to have specific details, maybe a certain client wants something, then for sure, I will always turn to the reference. Now, the speed that I draw with is then associated to also the exercise that we did earlier, the line confidence, the muscle memory again. From there, it's, where the hand just moves now. I don't have to really think about it.
Evidently. It's exciting to see just the effortlessness.
Well, the brain now is free to just think about other things. I can think about the questions that you asked me. I can think about other components and pieces within the illustration. I don't have to focus on what I'm actually drawing now. I can already think 2 steps ahead.
Yeah. Something as big and complex as a locomotive can be very threatening to a beginner who says, oh, how will I ever get there?
Right.
But that's why we're doing this. That's why Peter's talking about the basic structure underneath it, the use of the hand skills with lines to get away with going ink to paper instead of pencil to paper so that you could erase it first.
Yes.
A familiarity enough with the anatomy of a train to know what's worth putting detail in early on, which cross contours, windows, parts, big parts. This is not meant to intimidate. This is meant to inspire.
I would hope people would see it that way. Use that as a driving force to go discover for themselves.
Get more lessons from Peter Hahn at proko.com/perspective. Part 1 of our course is finished. Catch up on it to get in on Part 2 with new premium episodes each week. See you there.
This is something that did not take me an overnight, action of practice to get to. We're talking about 20 years. We appreciate what's happening in front of us, but you can't understand the depth of time investment that goes into it because there's no way to see it except through the expression.
Let's take that up. Were you interested in trains like as a kid? Is this a many years thing?
No.
When did you start researching them, looking at them, noticing the parts?
When I went to college, when I went to school, I started taking classes on stuff like this. Drawing classes, sketching classes with Norm and, the dynamic sketching methods that were introduced to me. Because as a kid, I was introduced to things like vehicles and the world of military, and I had a lot of interest in things like movies and comics and all that stuff. But, even the idea of this particular subject matter of a locomotive, I knew of them. Could I draw them? Barely, probably. So it wasn't until taking that class, it opened my curiosity up to go know more, because we'd be also asked to draw these things.
And you would go see real locomotive, like in L.A. over there near the...
Exactly.
Is it near Griffith Park?
It is.
And there's one down here in San Diego, too. Are you aware of that?
I have not been to that
There's one a lot like what you've got there. Going to a real train and looking at a real train and walking around it is one thing. Do you feel like if a person didn't have access to a real train and they were to look at several photos, they'd be able to figure it out?
To a degree. I think what happens a lot of times with the photograph is that you have no sense of context of other things. For instance, the scale, the size of the thing. It just gives you a different, not just an appreciation towards it, but an understanding towards what you're actually even trying to capture. There's an immensity of the weight that you get from even just standing next to it. You obviously don't have to watch it, actually move or operate, but just being in the presence of that subject, specifically of this locomotive, you can feel just the massiveness in terms of just the load of the thing. It feels that way even just visually, but when you're up close to it, like I said, the nuts and the bolts are so oversized and everything just feels big to it. And we all know that, we know that a train is large. And you can see it in the photograph in comparison to other things within the surrounding area. But when you actually see the thing in front of you, like I said, it's a change in the experience.
And even the sound of it.
Yes.
And the heat from it.
So at this point now, what I'm doing is going into the surface of the information and dropping in things like form shadows and cast shadows or reflected areas or turns of form using hatching methods and fills of dark value. So I switched over to a slightly thicker pen. This is an 08.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where things start to kind of not really slow down, but I start to specifically focus in on areas where before everything was about big sweeping motions, big action, So we start large, now we're going to the small. And as I now start to increase the surfacing information and cover these grounds and surfaces, you'll start to see a lot of that construction begin to erode away. This is where the confidence for me comes in. Not because I've drawn it many times, because I'm confident in my ability to layer the information where the stuff that I don't necessarily want to come to the forefront will be pushed back. So anything that I sketch and draw, usually if I even if I construct a little bit and I allow myself to, which is perfectly fine, I know that as I continue working on it and layering it like this, I'll be able to control how much of the information I really start to reveal or show.
Yeah, texture starts to come alive.
And then I start to place in things like these actions. Maybe we throw in something like smoke around it. Again, like I said, maybe we'll place in things about the backgrounds. Maybe there's like a mountainscape or trees. And of course, a lot of these larger shapes can be dropped into shadow. So people think, well, there's so much technical detail within the train. And how do you remember all those things? And the thing is, I don't. I'm able to essentially cover that information up with shadow shapes.
And the shadows strengthen the whole layout, too. There's a power in them.
Right. So grouping is what I'm doing right now. Big groupings, pushing things dark, and not having to feel like I'm forced to show every bit of information of detail, because it doesn't work that way. Do I have a general sense of light direction? To a degree. I'm thinking of just a top-down light, which is why I'm putting some of the shadows down here on the bottom side. So I give myself general directions of idea of light. And as I continue working my way backwards, I'll essentially give myself an area of focus to the foreground. And as things go to the back or behind the train, I will start to lessen the amount of information. Now, again, this is a kind of sketch and train that I've done many times. If I wanted to create something based on a locomotive, I can now imagine also a brand new thing, a vehicle design or otherwise, based on a train like this, and then contort the proportions and change out the mechanics, and imagine maybe it's like powered by something else, maybe it's some kind of electric train or a flying train. I can alter all those things, but it's built off of this basic foundation of what actually exists in the real world. But what I'm sure you'll also notice is that there isn't a moment where I have to stop and think about what I'm doing. It's all there, based on that muscle memory again. It doesn't require me to ponder as to what decisions to make. The decision has already been made. Now it's just reaction. It's just action at this point.
Now, how about these decisions of all of these dark parts you're putting in there, though? Those are decisions that can be pretty important decisions, because once you dig down, you've got a big dark shape there. Mm-hmm. But are you always confident that that big dark shape belongs there?
Yeah, mainly because, again, of the observation. Constant observation and the constant muscle memory, where I've done this kind of sketch and study before, and I'm able to see the visual data that I've accumulated over time, and I'm able to have that decision already been made from those actions of experience. So if I didn't have the experience of ever drawing a train like this at all prior to this moment, it'd be a lot more confident. I don't know if that's going to work or not.
Right.
But because of the countless amount of sketches that I've done prior to this, there is no more thinking. It's already been set.
You know enough about where the dark parts are.
Yes, to visually make it aesthetically pleasing.
Right, so it's not just where the dark parts are if you took a photograph of it. It's where the dark parts are as far as a pattern that you are creating on this picture that has nothing to do with perspective, nothing even to do with, it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the train, because you could paint the train different colors.
You could.
Or make it a glowing neon train where it wouldn't be dark at certain points. So you're making decisions that are aesthetic. There's some logic to them, mm-hmm. but there is, as much as anything else, just an instinct. Is that it? It's an instinct that it should go dark here.
But it's been trained.
It's been trained. A trained instinct.
Yes. So I would say I'm predicting at this point about maybe another 10 more minutes. And so I get to these kind of studies to a point of exercise where I've done it enough where I can now also predict how much time it'll take me to do certain things. That's an important lesson to also learn as you become someone who is not only a student, but also as a professional. I would say even as focusing specifically to students, it becomes an important thing, because a question that I get a lot of times is, how do I balance schedule well? I can't seem to get things done properly at the deadlines. And a lot of it is, again, based on the part of the training that is accumulated data, where you're able to give yourself an idea of context of how long things just take you. If I asked you to draw me this locomotive, can you tell me how long that will take? And then some people will say, maybe an hour, maybe this or that, but I know exactly how much time I'll need to have within a certain time frame. So if I know that time frame, I'm able to schedule around it more appropriately. But if I don't know, then I assume, well, this take me an hour. And you give yourself an hour, but all of a sudden it took you 2 hours, well, now you're behind. So that's also a drastically important thing that I found which is being able to understand your timeline within how long things take you.
It's like pacing yourself on a climb or a longer distance run.
You also save a lot more energy that way as you experience that, because you can exhaust yourself very easily by searching and acting and overworking things as well too, and not being able to let yourself just stop, knowing that you've done your job.
Right. I could go in there and graphite render that thing and spend 16 hours on it. And if the schedule is open and that's what you're trying to do is render this so that every texture is in there, that's one thing. You are doing something that it's got some qualities there in common with comic book artists.
Yes, sure. More graphical.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of push towards contrast and shapes.
Yeah, there is rendering in there. The shine on the exterior corners, the convex corners of things where you're leaving out marks.
Now that I've gotten to this point, the underlying construction that was there is no longer really there. And the construction is something that people wonder, is like, well, I thought you didn't construct. The thing is, I do all the time. I'm able to control the level of the construction that is apparent to me, but not apparent to others. So I can place in a couple of dots here and here and here, and you might think, well, those are just dots, but that's a part of construction that gives myself understanding of placement of where things are.
Okay, I want to take this up. This all-in-one sweep business. Did you, in your training, do work where you had to do things in separated stages?
I have, as a student, working with things like tracing paper and vellum. And it goes back before being a student. When I was at a very young age, my interest within comics and graphic novels was where it was. And so to practice my, skill set to match up to those people that I very much enjoyed, I would overlay tracing paper and I would trace their work just to get a sense about what it even looked like and felt like onto the page. Now, that to me is an early part of just being able to capture a sense of control as to what you're trying to do. But then when you start to get into the actual fundamentals in a formal training, we would use underlays, marker paper or vellum paper, tracing paper, and we'd overlay stuff. So as we do things like a quick sketch underneath it, we'd overlay it, we'd clean things up, overlay it, we'd even clean up even more, or do multiple layers of things. And so that was a practice that we had done quite often. And I definitely explored that on my own techniques as well too. So it's something that I would say is a standard as a practice, and I think all students should definitely explore within different materials. Today, obviously, it's not a very much a prominent thing for me, but for sure, it was something that I had done.
But you seem like you don't ever need to go back to that because you have now got a process that is the difference between a person who's writing a song and arranging a song and then putting down a rhythm track and having it where it takes several different stages. You seem much more like a jazz improviser who is making it up as you start the performance.
That's one of the analogies I would say to my students as well. The muscle memory part being a part of the exercise, a physical exercise. In terms of the expression of drawing, I associate more to music. So as we learn the instrument, and then we learn the techniques of beat or tempo, and then we then go into the idea of being able to confidently fall back on those things of muscle memory training and let yourself express.
Well, I hold this up as the high ideal for getting classic drafting skills into the subconscious for however long it takes until there is really no need to go through those stages. There is a time to write sentences out before speaking them. There's also a place for speaking spontaneously in the moment, and this is much more like that. You started this with a little outline up there, not an outline, but a side view ortho, side elevation.
Mm-hmm.
And you didn't do a front one, and you didn't do a top one, and you don't need to.
Yeah, I didn't even need to do that.
Mm-hmm.
This is more of a way to also get warmed up and get a feel of things. And I don't always have to, but I also allow myself to as well.
Mm-hmm.
People can assume based on what they see on my social media accounts that I don't ever loose sketch or practice on my own. But no, of course I do. Absolutely. And I certainly don't actively try to create this sense of mystery or even presentation to the idea that I don't need to do that kind of stuff or don't want to, but also in the fact that this is also fun to do.
Right. You don't need to. You can jump in.
Yeah. So we are practically there.
Oh, it's wonderful. This is a worthy goal.
At this point, when I get into these kind of motions where I'm searching for things and adding lines and nitpicking, is usually a sign of when you're done.
Okay, well, thank you very much for this demo, Peter. This was enjoyable for me, and I trust for the students as well. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
You can find Peter Hahn at Peter Hahn Style, and you can see all of his demos in my perspective course at proko.com/perspective. My course will give you the basics of form in space. Peter will help you hone your skills at peterhahnstyleart.com.